So as you can see, I changed the title of my talk. So I'm the PI of both Japanese FrameNet project as well as the Japanese FrameNet Constructicon. So today I want to talk about the latter. And Thiago?
Yeah. Tech support is here.
I'm fine.
Yeah, just yeah.
This one. Yeah. So Thiago asked us to talk about the status of our project as well as more specifically about what's multilingual about our project. So I have these two topics, and let's move on. So I briefly want to talk about the overview of the project with respect to the three things, and let's look at it. So with respect to the research grants, we first got our the first one was from 2015 to 2018, and we did a survey and we started building a Constructicon. And after 2018, we didn't officially worked on creating a Japanese FrameNet Constructicon, but now, earlier this year, we were able to get a second one, and that's what we are working on currently. So yeah, we got the grants from the Japanese government. And the sources for identify constructions in Japanese, we started out as in Swedish Constructicon and other projects. We first started out by looking at the Berkeley FrameNet Constructicon, and it was they have like 80 constructions in English, and it was pretty difficult because of we needed to look at the compare the structures, and since Japanese and English are typologically distinct, it was very difficult to come up with corresponding constructions in Japanese. And then we looked at some parallel corpora, and first we looked at the bilingual children's picture book. And then as a part of the global FrameNet project, we annotated the Japanese version of the TED Talk using FrameNet Brazil's tool. And then later, we also tried a Japanese translation of the novel, The Little Prince, using the German Constructicon tool. And we also have been working on redefining Japanese constructions from a reference grammar for Japanese learners. So it's really good because there are lots of constructions at different levels. But the problem is, since the book was primarily written for Japanese learners, there are lots of descriptions about the functions of the Japanese constructions. And these are pretty detailed, and sometimes it's difficult, especially when we try to align the Japanese constructions to other languages. Okay, and so we've been through different phases throughout since 2015. And first, we try to decide which annotation should be in the Japanese FrameNet and which kind of things cannot be dealt with in the framework or the tools in Japanese FrameNet, which basically the same tools and the framework from the Berkeley FrameNet. And by the way, so in Japanese FrameNet, we haven't really added new frames. And we work using the existing frames in Berkeley FrameNet because from the beginning of Japanese FrameNet project, we really wanted to see how much we can go using only the frames defined for the English lexicon in Berkeley FrameNet, because we've been really thinking about aligning and linking the Japanese frame data with the Berkeley FrameNet data from the beginning. But anyway, so there are things that cannot be handled in the framework of Japanese FrameNet, things like anything other than relations of predication, modification, or complementation, and linguistic expressions, objects that have both internal and external structures. And so that's how we started out working on the building Japanese FrameNet Constructicon. And then we move on to think about, to study based on the assumption that constructions evoke frames. And then we came up with a frame-based classification of constructions. And that led us to think about constructions that evoke semantic frames, but some other constructions evoke interactional frames. And interactional frames were originally proposed by Chuck Fillmore in one of his seminal papers, earlier papers on frame semantics, but it hasn't been really followed up, especially in the in frame semantics literature. I think there are people, linguists, who more or less exclusively work on interactional frames, but not too many people work on both semantic and interactional frames. And that led us to think about incorporating comparative concepts. So I want to talk about more specifically about what we've been doing with respect to comparative concepts. So I want to focus on these three things. Let's first look at our current goal. As I mentioned earlier, we are kind of from the beginning of Japanese FrameNet, and also from the beginning of Japanese FrameNet Constructicon project, we are trying to align Japanese constructions to those constructions in English. And as you already know, Japanese and English are typologically distant or distinct languages. And so it's very difficult to find correspondences based on form only. And also, many Japanese constructions seem to have conventionalized functions built into them. And that is something that we really focusing on. And with respect to the method of analysis of Japanese constructions in relation to constructions in English, we've been using this frames and constructions analysis method. I'm not going to go into the details, but the framework was this approach was originally proposed by Oliver in his 2013, 2017, and other papers. So it basically works top down, and we focus on sentence level constructions in different languages, and it tries to describe meanings and structures of sentences, focusing on the semantic frames evoked by the head of the sentence. And Oliver worked on German and English, and I've been working on Japanese and English. And I found out that even in the case of frame mismatch and structural divergence between corresponding sentences in Japanese and English, if the pragmatic function are the same, then the two constructions in Japanese and English are considered to be comparable. And so I'm not going to go into the details, but let me just show you three examples of cases in which there is a frame mismatch, structural divergence, but a frame functional match. So this is taken from The Little Prince, the Japanese and English translations of the novel. It was a question of life or death for me, and in Japanese, 生きるか死ぬかという状況だった. So a literal translation would be like, it was a situation that says live or die. So the English, I used the names of constructions from basically from the Berkeley FrameNet Constructicon. So the English sentence is an instant construct of the subject predicate construction, and the Japanese sentence is a construct of the null subject construction. So they are different structure. They have different structures. But if you look at the function of the two sentences, I think I got the name of the function from Bill's a book, event-centered representational function. The two sentences have the same function, which has to do with giving new information about a situation, as opposed to a topic comment sentence. So let me look at the, let me show you the second example of frame mismatch structural divergence, but the same function. So this was taken from the bilingual children's book. 変な箱が落ちてるわ. Literal translation would be like, a strange box has fallen. Hey, here's a strange box. So the Japanese sentence is an instant of theory construction, because instead of the topic marker, the subject is marked with a nominative, and the English sentence is an instance of here. I think I made up this sentence, here be construction. So structurally different, but the and also the frames evoked by the head of the sentence in the two Japanese and English sentences, they are different. The Japanese, the head verb, the main verb, evokes the motion directional frame, whereas in English, the copula evokes the being located frame. And then structurally they are different, but they have the same function of entity central presentational function. Okay, so I think the two sentences should be considered corresponding. Okay, so let me give you the last example of a frames mismatch, structural divergence, but functional match. So first of all, the head of the sentences in Japanese and English evoke different frames. In the case of Japanese, usefulness frame, and in the case of the English sentence, the main verb evokes the intercepting frame, and they have different structures. The Japanese is an example of a conditional construction, whereas in English it's an imperative construction. But the two sentences have the same function of suggesting something. So I would like to think these sentences to be corresponding to one another, to one another. So that led us to think that we really need to think about how to align Japanese and English constructions in terms of functions or comparative concepts. And as Bill points out in the book, when we analyze forms, it's important to separate constructions which are supposed to be universal with strategies which are not universal. And when we analyze meanings, we need to separate semantic content from information packaging functions. And as I mentioned earlier, in frame semantics, we have these two kinds of frames. And in Berkeley FrameNet, the frames, all the frames are basically semantic frames, and there aren't many. I think there's only one attention-getting frame, which can be considered an interactional frame. So that led us to think about how to talk about functions of constructions, whether in terms of functions or information package functions or interactional frames. And to first focus on the distinction between semantic and interactional frames, over the years, even within frame semantics, several terms have been proposed, have been used, but basically the distinction is between semantics frame versus interactional frames. And the interactional frames have to do with how we conceptualize what is going on between the speaker and the hearer, or between the author and the reader. Okay, And so let me give an example of semantic frame. Okay, a construction that evokes a semantic frame in Japanese. It's the comparative inequality construction. I use the same term as the English construction. And so an example is written at the bottom of the slide. これの方があれより長い. Okay, so this sentence is an instance of the comparative inequality construction, and the sentence evokes the comparative inequality frame, which reports inequalities between item and standard as arguments of a plain adjective. Okay, so this is an example of construction evoking the semantic frame, but as I mentioned earlier, it seems like there are many constructions that evoke interactional frames. And I'll give an example. I call this the suspended clause construction. And construction element is a clause. And this construction evokes, I put a star because this frame hasn't been defined in Berkeley FrameNet. I made this up. Empathy demanding frame, in which the speaker expects the hearer to make an inference and to understand his or her situations. Okay, so it's the example goes like this. それじゃね、切らせてもらうから. So on the phone, that's it, because I'm gonna hang up. Okay, so these are little translation, but the construction means something like, the sentence means something like, don't bother me anymore. Okay, so it's just an example, but it seems like Japanese constructions, sentence level construction by clausal constructions, they have specific functions built into it. And this is an example of trying to use a kind of interactional frame to talk about the meaning or the function of the construction. So what I'm currently working on are two things. One research question we are working on is the question of what pragmatic functions are. So we're trying to analyze pragmatic functions of Japanese constructions as combination of semantic content and information packaging. But the questions I often get is that, is there any exhaustive list of pragmatic functions? And I think it's really difficult to come up with a list of exhaustive list of pragmatic functions. And especially since in Japanese, there seem to be very elaborate functions built into many constructions. But so if I can get some feedback from you, I would really appreciate it. But currently, I don't think I can make an exhaustive list of pragmatic functions, but I would really like to be able to somehow analyze pragmatic functions in a systematic way, comparing the functions with in Japanese constructions with those in other languages. And the second question we are trying to solve right now is whether we can describe pragmatic functions as interactional frames in frame semantics. So basically, I see there are lots of pragmatic functions built into Japanese constructions. And since Berkeley FrameNet hasn't really worked on defining interactional frames, and I'm trying to define interactional frames needed for defining Japanese constructions. But this relation, which has been pointed out by Thiago earlier this morning, so they how to incorporate, how to think about the relations between comparative concepts, especially functions, in relation to interactional frames. So these are the questions that we are working on. So to wrap up, so far, we've been trying to align Japanese constructions with those in English. And since I've been using this approach, frames and constructions analysis, I've been analyzing lots of Japanese constructions which have rich pragmatic functions. And I'm trying to define those pragmatic functions either as an hybrid between semantic content and information packaging functions, or as examples of interactional frames. So the next steps will be to analyze those pragmatic functions as combination of semantic content and information package, and also trying to relate those pragmatic functions as with interactional frames. So that concludes my talk. Thank you so much.